The Zulu greeting does not mean hello. It means I see you. I see you. Yebo means yes, you do. You see me. So you're going up. Yebo. There was once a man who found an eagle's egg. And he placed that egg into the nest of a barnyard chicken. And that eaglet hatched with a brood of chickens, grew up with them, thinking it was the chicken, and did everything the chickens did. It scratched and pecked in the earth for bugs and grubs, and it cackled and squawked, and it flapped its wings furiously to rise only a foot or two off the ground. And the years went by, and the eagle grew old. But one day, in the cloudless blue sky above her, that eagle saw a magnificent bird. Oh, it was just gliding gracefully and majestically on the wind currents with barely a beat of its beautiful golden wings. The eagle said to her chicken friend, "Who is that?" With a faint memory of something which had gone far before. "Who is that?" Chicken said, "Oh, that is Eagle. She is queen of the birds." Eagle. "Yes, that is Eagle. She belongs to the sky. We are chickens. We belong to the earth." And so the eagle lived and died as a chicken. For that is who she thought she was. August 1958. I was between my junior and senior years in high school, and I was in my favorite city, Manhattan. It was a typical August day in Manhattan. It was hot, it was humid, it was sultry. I was in my dainty beige island shift. I love that shift. It had no waist, and neither did I. Little straw purse, white gloves. I was on my way to the Lydia O'Leary Salon at 41 East 57th Street for my first experience with a product called Covermark, a modern miracle. And I had need of this modern miracle because I had this mark to be covered, this birthmark. I could not say that word until I was in my 50s. I couldn't even say the word chic. Medically speaking, it was called congenital hemangioma, port wine stain variety. But technically, it was a congenital defect. Years later, when I was trying to get Blue Cross to pay for laser beam treatment, I was forced to refer to it as a congenital defect because Blue Cross would not reimburse cosmetic improvement. But in New York City, that day between my junior and senior years in high school, that is what I was after, a cosmetic improvement. I was staying with my Aunt Reba in her brownstone apartment on 3 West 87th Street, which was right across from Central Park. Aunt Reba was a teacher of the voice, of the opera. Well, she wasn't really my aunt. We called her aunt, but she had really been my grandfather's mistress. Quintessential New York woman. She was sophisticated, she was poised, she was well-read, she was classy. She had this voice, she'd answer the phone, she'd say, "Hello, class." I was not that kind of woman. I was no kind of woman, really. I was 16, I was fat, I was loud, I had pimples, acne, vulgaris, they called it. And I had no class, very little class. Last time I'd been in New York, Aunt Reba had taken me and my cousin Lucille out, Lucille of the 19-inch waist, out to dinner at the Tavern on the Green, which was one of the classiest restaurants in New York City at the time. And as we drove up in the taxi, I thought, get rid of the gun, Carolyn. I threw it out of the window of the cab, and it stuck right on the chest of the doorman on the Tavern on the Green. He this salon, and if they did, this makeup was really a miracle. Those faces were perfect. While I waited to see my cosmetic consultant, I read the pamphlet called A Modern Miracle, which was the true story of Lydia O'Leary and how she had created and invented Covermark. And I knew it was a true story because a line under the title proudly said, "All the information in this article has been corroborated and investigated by Reader's Digest." The story began with Lydia trying to get a patent for her new makeup. 8 black-robed judges of the Court of Appeals watched this lovely auburn-haired girl that was Lydia. She took her hand, she daubed some cold cream on her face, and then she took a towel and she wiped it off, revealing a hideous, flaming birthmark from forehead to chin. My stomach lurched, and I broke out into the familiar cold sweat of a criminal caught in the act. Hideous. A truth I have always suspected, but had never had the nerve to voice. No longer, it said, no longer did the judges see her trim figure, her auburn, beautiful hair, her blue eyes. All they saw was that terrible disfigurement. It was in print, terrible, hideous. Add to that my acne vulgaris, and there I was, hideous and vulgar. But within a few minutes, with a couple of deft movements, she applies her makeup, then a little street makeup, a little lipstick, a little powder, and she is transformed once again into this charming young woman. In fact, the transformation is so amazing that the judges grant her whatever it was that I said she was trying to get there. Oh man, my age, you know what I'm talking about? The words go. But anyway, whatever it was, they gave it to her. They gave it to her because she had created a makeup that would stay on for the weekend and be indistinguishable from skin. I could hardly swallow. Of course, the rest of the pamphlet talked about her agonizing childhood, how she hid from staring, cruel eyes, and how she comes to New York with a college degree and cannot get any sort of job where it involves meeting people because of her facial blemish. I could identify with that. I thought I would never be able to get a job waiting on tables, which had been the profession of both my mother and my father, because I believed my face would make the diners throw up. Well, the rest of the pamphlet goes on to describe the suffering, handicapped, humiliated, stuttering unemployables who slink or shuffle into Lydia's office with their hats turned down, their collars turned up, hair unfurled over their faces, all in these pitiful attempts to hide this terrible scar. And of course, all of this wretched refuse is reclaimed by the product, which is always in italics in the print. They all walk out of that salon, poised, attractive, ready to take their places in the ranks of commerce and industry without fear, without hesitation. Some of them will sell ladies' hats or ready to wear. Some will sit in reception offices and front desks. Some will wait on tables. And it said, despite an ugly birthmark, a girl could get married sans facial disorders, as a bride should be. Well, the thing that strikes me now is that I was never offended by that pamphlet, or I wasn't angered by any of the stuff I read in that pamphlet. Nor was I ever angered by offended by any of the indignities that I had suffered growing up, the taunts, the slights, the teases, the whispers, I hated like pigeons in tap shoes. Or mothers angrily shushing their children, saying, not to stare, warning them not to stare. Or clucking old ladies full of pity and unsolicited advice. Poor thing. Have you tried hot mineral oil and novenas? And always was the question. Whisper behind a cupped palm, shouted over a pointed finger. What happened to your face? What happened to her face? What happened to your face? Which to me meant, what happened to me? What was wrong with me? I was not offended by that. I looked at that as the inevitable consequence of who and what I was, a freak. All my anger was turned inward. Of course they spat upon me. I was a leper. And so there occurred the incident on the city bus. I was riding home from downtown on the bus once, and I was sitting there. Next to me was what I considered to be the inevitable empty seat. But then a boy, I was about 10 years old, and a boy got on the bus, and he sat down next to me in the empty seat. I thought, a boy is sitting next to me. A boy is sitting next to me. Then I felt that boy touch my leg. I thought, a boy is touching my leg. A boy is touching my leg. But he didn't say a word and got up and left the bus. And in the afterglow of that brief encounter, I put my hand there on my leg where he had touched me, and I found that he had wiped his snot on me. The only solution was to stop being a leper. And so I sat in that cosmetic waiting room, praying to be changed. Well, finally one of the polished ladies came and got me. She led me to a small makeup cubicle. There was a hairdresser's chair there. There was a large mirror. There was a counter filled with the product, which fairly screamed italics. She brushed my hair back from my face. She wrapped a towel around me, and she began to apply the makeup. It was, she told me, to be gently patted on. But this stuff was thick. I mean, it was thicker than something that would stay on for a weekend and be indistinguishable from skin. And you see, in my naivete, I thought that she just put on a little makeup like Lydia did in the courtroom, and the birthmark would be gone. But in essence, there were several layers to the cover-up. First, the base coat, applied to the entire face, taken way up to the hairline and the temples, down all along the neck. You couldn't stop at the chin. It looked like you were wearing a mask. Down onto the chest. That was to make the face all one color, a blank canvas, so to speak. But then, because the face is not really all one color, the brown shading cream was gently patted on. Any place that shadows would make the face appear more natural. Then the third coat, the rouge. This amazed me. We had just gone to all that trouble to take the red out. Now she was putting the red back in. But the polished lady assured me, rosy cheeks are natural, birthmarks are not. Then the final coat, a layer of talcum powder applied liberally to the entire face, and then the polished lady left me to set. When something like this is happening to you, you look, but you don't really look. I mean, it's like when the hairdresser is cutting your hair, you don't really look. I mean, you can't see without your glasses anyway, and sometimes you just want to close your eyes and pray that God is guiding the hand of the professional who's transforming you. Besides, what can you really do about it? So while all of this was happening, I had looked, but I hadn't really looked. I just wanted to see the finished product. After about 15 minutes, powder, lipstick, and now I was ready to look. A shimmering, white, matte finished, moon-shaped kabuki mask stared back at me. The hair along my forehead and my temples was powdery white, and when I moved in for a closer look, I could see that the pores on my nose, where she had so gently patted, looked like huge dark craters on the far side of the moon. I could already feel my own skin oils seeping up through this hard, powdered interior, and the makeup felt and looked heavy and oppressive on my face. But the birthmark was gone. True, I did not look like the charming young Lydia who was transformed in front of the 8 black-robed judges. In fact, I looked like if I stood on a street corner at 11 a.m., 11 p.m., I'd make $39.10. Remember the old joke, who gave you the dime? They all did. That's how I look. But the birthmark was gone. True, now I knew that those O'Leary ladies didn't have birthmarks because none of them looked like me. Thick, obvious, artificial. But the birthmark was gone. And so on that sultry summer day, I left the Lydia O'Leary salon with the tools of my transformation, ready to face senior year. Senior year? In the 50s, that meant the height of puberty. Times have changed. It also meant at least the beginnings of intimacy. It meant parties and dates and the prom. And I was going to face this senior year with a brand new face, an unmarked face. You know, I don't remember one person mentioning my new face, not even my friends. And I think it's because the makeup itself was so hideous that nobody had the nerve to mention it. 100 times worse than the worst haircut you have ever gotten. I wore that makeup for 12 years. 12 years. And in all that time, maybe 1 or 2 people said to me, "Gee, you wear a lot of makeup." Many, many, many more people said to me, "Gee, you really sweat a lot, don't you?" That gives you a basis of comparison. That makeup was even more unmentionable than sweat. Around that time, I went to a palmist, a gypsy palm reader. His name was Daniel Moon. Well, it was later that I went to Daniel Moon. And we talked about many things. And among one of the things we talked about, I said, "What is this all about?" He said, "Well, you know, it's just an accident." But he said, "It's a very happy one." He said, "Because people who have scars or quirks on the inside," he said, "they're very secretive. They're very closed people because they have something to hide." He said, "But you, people like you, who have a scar on the outside, you're very open, you're very honest, you're genuine." He said, "You were fortunate to have this," he told me. But what Daniel Moon did not know was with the purchase of Covermark, the hiding had begun. When I bought that product, my very fortunate scar moved to the inside. And now, I wasn't trying just to hide the hideous birthmark. I was also trying to hide the hideous makeup as well. The great irony of my life began on that sultry summer day, and for 12 years I lived a life of contradictions. Look at me, don't look at me. Come close, not too close. As soon as I put that makeup on, I never let anyone get too close because I did not want to look at them looking at me. And so for 12 years, intimacy was not possible. For 12 years, every school day or work day, I got up, I put on that makeup, applied it, a chore, which could sometimes take up to a half an hour, because sometimes when we put it on, it just wouldn't cover. You'd have to take it all off and put it on all over again. When I got home from wherever I was, I took it off. If I wanted to go out at night, I had to reapply it, so most nights I stayed home. Unless I had some mandatory task outside on the weekends, which took me out of drawers, I stayed home. Sometimes I sat in the yard, not often. And if friends of my parents or my two brothers came to visit and they had never seen me before and I had no makeup on, I stayed in my room until they were gone. No one who didn't already know saw me without my makeup for 12 years. That makeup, which stayed on for the weekend, indistinguishable from skin. Within about an hour of application, the makeup would mix with the oils in my face, and it would soon be floating above the surface of my skin. And like a slowly developing negative, my right cheek would gradually darken. Touch-ups, not possible. Once you set that makeup with the powder, if you wanted to touch it up, you had to take it off and put it on again. And so, an itch could never be scratched, only gently patted away. For 12 years, when I put my glasses on, I could never take them off again because it made a mark right down to the skin. For 12 years, I sneezed through my mouth because I couldn't wipe my nose. And I couldn't blow my nose. And I couldn't pick my nose for 12 years. 12 years. During those 12 years, I learned to hate the summer. Because summer days were so hot and I couldn't get the makeup on over the sweat. And the heat would melt my face twice as fast. It was waterproof. I could go into the water, but I couldn't dry my face when I came out. And I couldn't wipe off the salt and the sand which got stuck to it. And I couldn't get a tan through the grease. And even though I had loved the beach as a kid, my mother used to have to drag me home a prune at the end of the day. I just stopped going. The dates that I thought I would have with my new face never did materialize. I did go dancing once or twice, but what was the use? I mean, even if I did meet someone in the shadows of a darkened club, I could never go any further. I couldn't dance cheek to cheek. I could never see them in the light. For 12 years, I hid. I did nothing I didn't have to do. I didn't take courses, I didn't play sports, I didn't go on weekend trips, I didn't do sleepovers, I didn't join clubs, I didn't join movements. I was exhausted. The hiding wore me out. But no one knew how isolated I really was, because I wasn't quiet, not in my nature. I wasn't withdrawn. I didn't stutter. I was loud. I was articulate. I was funny. And most of all, I was nice. And my heart wasn't dead. I knew that someday someone would see through the mask. They would see me. They would see me. And someday someone would love me. And so it came to pass that the Newport Jazz Festival came to Rhode Island. And my friend Mary Jane and I, we dressed so carefully for the first night's festivities, and I did an especially wonderful job on my makeup. It looked fabulous. I looked the best that I could look. And as we sat under the stars, listening to Ray Charles singing Georgia. I'll never forget it. A fellow in the row behind me leaned forward and whispered drunkenly in my ear, "You are so fucking ugly, I can't believe it." And so I closed my heart. Hope that was the lie. This was the truth. Congenital defect. Until the year that I was 29, I went through the motions of life. Every day, work day, I got up, I put on that makeup. When I couldn't face putting it on, I stayed in bed. Some days I went out, most of the time I stayed home. And one summer I even got a job as a waitress in my uncle's restaurant concession in a public golf course. I remember one of those days. 2 guys stiffed me, another one left me a dime. And still I joked, and I talked loud, and I was articulate, and I was nice. But inside, the fury grew, and the self-hatred grew, and the loneliness grew, until the year that I was 29. When St. Francis of Assisi was 29, known then as Francesco Bernardoni, when he was 29, he was riding his horse on a deserted road just outside his hometown of Assisi, and St. Francis, Francesco, came upon a leper. Now, he had always had a horror of lepers, these despised, feared outcasts, forced to ring a bell and call, "Unclean! Unclean!" to ward off unsuspecting travelers. But on this particular day, Francesco Bernardoni, without warning, came upon a leper, dressed in filthy rags, his body with a putrid stench, his face half eaten away by disease. Francesco did have no reason, he had no reason to stop. He could have just ridden right on, and thrown a coin to the poor creature, but for some reason, he could not move. For some time now, Francesco had been feeling this emptiness inside, this void, this sense of isolation. That's why he went to Rome. He went on the pilgrimage to Rome. He kissed the relics. He gave the offerings. He said all the prayers. But still he could not escape this burden of his isolation. And on this road, and with the leper, he felt that same sense of emptiness and isolation again. And so, Francesco dismounted and stood facing this creature who was there waiting for him. The sun beat down, and there were no shadows to soften this encounter, and there was no place to hide to avoid the playing out of it. The leper put out his hand, palm out, in a gesture of supplication. Francis stood transfixed, and then he began moving toward the leper. He outstretched his own hand as though he were going to greet an old friend. When I was 29, I knew that I was living and I was dying, trying to live the life of a barnyard chicken. But there was something inside of me, something that had not been shriveled, something besides hope that longed to fly with the eagles. And so I decided if I did not come out of hiding, I would die. And I came out, slowly at first, just kind of peeping from behind the tree. In fact, I went 3,000 miles away to do it. I went to Oregon. Oregon? I didn't even really know where it was. And I didn't know how to pronounce it. I was going to Oregon. I determined I would take off my makeup and learn to live with who and what I was. I had been given a fellowship to Eugene, Oregon, where the university is. I found myself a little apartment, and then I huddled in it for 3 days, terrified to go and meet my colleagues in the theater department. I thought they would say, oh, no, 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 no. We can't have someone who looks like you in the theater. And I thought they would take my fellowship away. But they didn't take it away. And Oregon, that great green mama of tie-dye and macrame and marijuana. She enveloped me in her big, soft, warm breasts, and I was reborn. People smiled at me on the street. I went swimming naked in lakes in the mountains. I acted in plays, but I still wore makeup then because I didn't feel it was fair to impose myself on some poor, unsuspecting character. And no one asked the question. I could not have had a gentler beginning. But after 3 years, I thought, there might be professional opportunities in New York City. And so I moved to my favorite city, that great concrete and steel daddy, where I encountered the street. And they asked the question, what happened to your face? A guy selling neckties on a cardboard box overturned on 14th Street. What happened to your face? What happened to your mouth? The guy in the subway, he's pointing, he's hollering. You usually don't pay attention to that in the subway, but I realize he's pointing and hollering at me, and he's saying, you have the mark of Satan on you. You sold your soul to the devil. You are a spawn of evil. I said, hey, buddy, eat shit. You made me tough. But New York was hard. And so after many years living there, I moved back to Rhode Island. And it was there in my 50s that storytelling found me. This thing that I had done all my life that was as natural to me as breathing. It said, ollie, ollie, and free. Come on, you're still hiding. Come on out. Storytelling, you can do this. I said, I can't. You can do it, and you can make a living at it. I said, I can't. I said, yes. All you have to do is tell stories to little kids. Little kids? Little kids? I didn't hang around with little kids. I mean, I was uncomfortable around little kids. Little kids made me nervous. I didn't like little kids. Little kids asked the question. I mean, I could deal with the street, but I didn't know how to answer little kids. And so it was that the storytelling journey began. And the question came almost immediately. It was after a library show, and there was a little girl. She couldn't have been bigger than that. Her voice as soft as a whisper, tugging on my hand. What happened to your face? What happened to your face? What happened to your face? So quiet, so soft. It was so easy to ignore her, and I did. And I went home, and I sobbed. I said, God, I can't do that to little kids. If you want me to do this work, you have to tell me what to say. And the voice said, just speak the truth. So the question came, again, right away, a plump little girl. So what happened to your face? I opened my mouth, and the truth came through. 50 years old. It's a birthmark. I was born with it. Oh, does it hurt? No, that doesn't hurt. Thanks for asking. And the question would come up, and I got a little better at it. I got better and better at answering it. One time I was in an inner city school, and the whole gym was filled with kids and teachers on the side, and No, and we went on. But the fact was that it did hurt. It still hurt because when I would walk into schools, kids would go, they would see that fear in their eyes and that shock that I had always seen, and they would go, she's so ugly. But as soon as the story began, of course, they would forget. Well, about that time, a colleague of mine said to me, you're a good storyteller. You should come up with a story that you could tell the children. You could begin your show with that story about your facial scar. I said, a story? Bring it up? I mean, if they ask me, I'm going to answer it. But bring it up? Because I thought if you didn't bring it up, it was like the elephant in the room. If you didn't mention the elephant, no one would see it. Bring it up. Well, just about that time, I took a guided meditation class. Well, it was a meditation class, but the first thing was a guided meditation. And I'd never taken meditation, and I found out later that it was a very standard meditation. You know the one. The woman is leading us in the meditation, and you know this when you're walking down the path in the forest. There's always a path in the forest. And you're engaging every sense. You're feeling and crunching and hearing, smelling, and all your senses are engaged. And then as you continue walking down the path, you come to a clearing. There's always a clearing. And in that clearing is an edifice, some sort of a constructed thing, which is a place of learning, she tells us. A place of learning. My place of learning was a little one-room schoolhouse. She said, now when you go into this place of learning, you will meet your spiritual guide. You will meet your mentor, your celestial teacher. Wait. So I went up the steps of the schoolhouse. I opened the door, I went inside. The little desk was there. I squeezed behind the desk. I sat down, and I looked up in the front of the room, and there was my spiritual guide. It was the goddess, of course. But my goddess was the fairy godmother in Walt Disney's Cinderella. Salvador Lubichka, baby, mommy, boy. She had the hat, she had the golden wand, and now, I don't remember what she said, but I do remember that you were leaving the guided meditation. She said, now, you have to leave this place. You always have to leave the place. And she said, but you can always come back, and they always tell you that too. And before you leave now, your spiritual guide, your mentor, is going to give you a sign. A sign. And whenever you see this sign or think about this sign, you will know that you are not alone. You are guided. You are directed. So I sat at my little desk and I waited to get this sign from my spiritual mentor. And she stood there and she went like this. because he said that my birthmark looks like the map of the United States. Then I had to remember my geography. I said, yeah, see, here's Oregon and Washington. You're going, yeah. Oregon down here. Here's Texas. This is the New England state. And this is Rhode Island. And so they laugh. And sometimes now they call me Miss America. And sometimes I get letters that say, when I grow up, I want to be dear Miss America. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. And so, Francesco Bernardoni, as he approaches the leper, is this being that he has despised and feared for so long, as he gets close, a familiar revulsion rises up, and he falters. But he realizes this is a meeting he longs to make. And so, boldly, he takes the leper's hand in his. That lumpen, misshapen thing. The fingers so swollen and calloused that they're not even differentiated. The skin so hard and coarse, it's like the paw of an animal. And for a moment, Francesco tries to think of something to say that will restore him to the world that he knows. But even as he struggles, he realizes that that world of smoke and mirrors that has blinded him and confused him for so long is over. It's gone. He will never go back. Somehow he has come through it, and now he is standing in the fire. So tenderly, he pulls the leper to him, and they embrace. And Francesco kisses the ravaged face of his once despised enemy. Tears fill his eyes and wash away everything that has come before that moment. And Francesco feels a peace and a joy he has never felt before. He mounts his horse, begins to ride away, but he turns back for one last look, and the leper is gone. But in the cloudless blue sky above him, he sees floating with grace and majesty on the wind currents a magnificent golden bird. Soy Mona, I see